As you walk in to CeBIT, it's pretty exciting. You see these drones, you see lots of toys, 3D printing, robots playing soccer. But does any of this actually make monetary sense for a business, or is this just an excuse to buy some toys that maybe they didn't have when they were young?
Well, there'll definitely be people that like to buy toys, but there are really great business uses, especially for flying robots and other types of robotics. I'll give you an example. In agriculture, if we think about the problem, there are really big areas that have to be covered, and flying over with airplanes is quite expensive and you can't do it all the time. But we have problems that we need to check on, water levels, pest infestation, weed infestation. There are already fixed-wing flying robots that are fully autonomous that have been designed here in Sydney at the Australian Centre for Field Robotics that are able to fly over large areas of land and detect invasive weed species, and then be followed with hovering platforms, whether they be helicopter type or rotocopters or quadcopters, that are able to then take mitigating action like spraying herbicide or pesticide, things that really benefit farmers.
Shara, I don't know if I just get unduly frustrated, and maybe this is unrealistic, but I feel like we've been doing robotics for a very long time. I remember nearly 20 years ago we had the first little Sony robotic dog, and so when I see the little robots playing soccer, I think, how far have we actually gone in 20 years, and are we making the leaps that we always thought we would be making when it comes to robotics?
I think we're a bit slower than many people originally imagined. If you think about science fiction, you think of humanoid robots that are, run by artificial intelligence, but that's not really what it's all about. There are different levels of automation. One of the examples that I really like is combining 3D printing with very high-grade 3D scanning of a person's limbs and being able to design robotic exoskeletons to help people walk again if they've been disabled or harmed in a trauma. That's a fantastic use of robotics.
On the drones side of things, kind of the same point though. We've had remote-controlled planes for as long as I can remember, from my own youth. Have these drones really improved that much on what we saw 20 years ago, or are they actually having a practical difference? And I know we keep hearing about companies like Amazon potentially using them for deliveries, but how realistic is that?
There are all kinds of drones, and they go in shapes and sizes from big fixed-wing aircraft to the sorts of things that you see right down there to tiny insect-like drones. The question is, what are you going to use them for? In situations where you're doing monitoring of fixed plant assets in inaccessible areas, like at a mine, they make absolute sense. And when you combine it with software that allows these machines, these robots, to fly autonomously, that is, without human intervention, then you can start to save a lot of time and money. Delivery drones in metro areas, I think that we're way out. We have so many problems that will need to be overcome before we even consider that. First of all, think about how noisy these things are.
Yeah.
Can you imagine these going down your street every morning, every night, all the time? They drive you all mad. But what about things like insurance and safety? How do you prevent things from, crashing into each other? You'd need to have highways in the sky. You might need special types of insurance. You might want to equip them with black boxes like airplanes have.
One of the other, big events here is seeing the new Tesla vehicle here. Now, what I think is quite interesting is that when you actually look under the bonnet of this car, there's actually a lot of empty space because the electric motor is so much smaller, but they've chosen to keep this traditional shape of a car, the car as we kind of expect it to be. Is that part of the problem for technology, that once you start making giant leaps to kind of keep people happy, keep people thinking that it's something they understand, you kind of have to keep almost like a pastiche of how it used to look? And how do you overcome that as a technology expert?
Well, one of the ways you do it is to make it fun and cool. Now, this is an example that is very much just in the research labs, but MIT was playing around with a city car that is actually able to change its shape so that the doors move around and it actually folds up to be able to let people off only on curbside instead of one getting out on the side of traffic and one getting out on the curbside. It's a completely different thing. When we get to the stage where our cars are completely autonomous, in other words, we as people don't have to do anything with a steering wheel or a braking system, then they might look more like a living room, or an office robotics, where literally you're just sitting in this mobile vehicle, and for all intents and purposes, you've got a robot piloting it.
Okay, the big change over the last, say, 5 years has been the rise of mobile, the power of a smartphone, the fact that it allows you to do things that you previously could only do with a proper computer, or at least a laptop, you can now do with something that's in your pocket. What's the big game changer that's coming next? In the next 2 to 3 years, what thing is going to shake up the industries more broadly? What's going to change the way we live?
Well, let me take you out to a 10-year horizon where I've pegged 3 game-changing technologies. The first is the combination of augmented and virtual reality. It's going to give us a layer of context on everything that we see and do that we can't imagine right now. It's going to change our lives the way smartphones have. The second is 3D printing. There are so many applications well beyond what most people are even thinking about. And the third is robotics, and that includes everything from robots being used in healthcare to robots that might be social companions to the kinds of flying robots that I'll be talking about tomorrow.
Okay, augmented reality, virtual reality, or a type of virtual reality, hasn't this kind of been proven to not work? Again, I feel like we had that kind of technology back in the 90s at least, and also when we saw a program like, say, Second Life, this idea that we'd all have avatars and that's how we'd exist, they kind of fizzled out, didn't they? Does that suggest maybe people don't want to live a virtual life, maybe they want to live the real life?
Well, what I see is not so much a virtual life, it's a superimposition on top of your real life of extra information. So if I go out to about 7 years, I would imagine that we're going to start to have smart contacts, literally pieces that can fit in our eye that are completely translucent.
Even after the Google Glass seems to have been put on the back burner?
Look, there are a lot of people working on the whole smart glass and smart eyewear, but when I look at smart contacts, it's actually combining biotech with software and doing some really interesting things. But if you can imagine walking down a street or being in a fair like this and you see somebody and you recognize them and you think, oh my God, where do I know him or her from? And then virtually in your eyepiece, without you doing anything or saying anything, it pops up. You know, hey, that's Carrington. He interviewed you at CeBIT in May 2015. And
well, hopefully you'd remember that anyway.
Yes.
But we've seen Apple Watch be released at the moment, really. It's coming to market. We're about to see whether or not it's a success. It's seen as kind of the first proper piece of wearable technology that's really got mass market appeal. How closely are other companies watching that to see whether or not people are actually willing to take the functionality that they've currently got on their smartphones and put it elsewhere on their body?
Well, everybody's watching it, but I'd also point to an interesting startup called Pebble, which, in spite of the whole juggernaut of Apple launching its wearable watch, the iWatch, they've managed to raise a huge amount of money just through crowdfunding for their second iteration. And there are going to be all kinds of wearable devices. We're going to have smart clothing that integrates electronics in with the things that we wear.
Fantastic. We're going to have to leave it there. We could talk all day.